everybody? Welcome back to the Wonbyone Podcast. I'm your host, Obi Megano, and today we're going to be hosting a community episode where I just kind of get on here and talk about some of the things that are top of mind, some of the situations, scenarios that I'm seeing in my athletes currently. And one of the main things that I want to talk about is roles. So identifying your roles and what it means for your team. So what do I mean by that? A lot of times, a lot of athletes, we're building our skills during the game, during practice, in our off time, and we want to show everybody those skills that we're building, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that, but when it comes to the gameplay, you've got to figure out what your role is and how you can be most effective to your team during that time, right? So I'll use myself as an example. When I was in high school, I played the 5, and a lot of you guys know that now. Right, I'm a shooter, shooting guard, or whatever, but I played the 5 in high school. And it was difficult for me because I was the biggest guy on the court, so I was naturally put at that position, which I deal with a lot of athletes now that are bigger than everybody else, but you're not going to be bigger than everybody for the rest of your career. And I think that's kind of where the disconnect comes in at. It's like, do I work on what is most effective and efficient for right now today? Or do I work on what coaches need or want to see me doing at the next level? And those two sides are often what's pulling players into doing things that is not beneficial for themselves and for the team. So the example for me is playing the 5 in high school and then wanting to work on my guard skills versus wanting to work on my post skills. Right? I'm dealing with an athlete that is, 6'2", in the 8th grade, but maybe they stop growing and maybe they've got to work. They're going to at some point have to work on their guard skills. And that's where their parents kind of get into it. And their parents their parents understand that. And they think to themselves, okay, well, little Timmy or whatever the kid's name is needs to be developing his guard skills. He doesn't need to be playing in the post. He won't always be a post, which I say, well, I understand that. I get the point that kid won't always play in that position. But while I do agree that they need to work on their guard skills, what's more important than what they need to work on is where they currently are. And so as a trainer for myself, when I got athletes, when they come in, I work on how can I make you most efficient right now today? That's number one. What do you need to work on right now today? And so we'll spend, 80, 60, 70, 80% of that time working on where you are today, working on your post moves. We'll go back to the 6'2" guy. We're working on your post moves, knowing that you're going to need those guard skills, but we don't need to work on those guard skills yet. Not until we first understand what we need to do to be most effective right now. So the boring part, you're going to be working on a lot of footwork. You're going to be working on your footwork. You're going to be working on, low post moves, jump hooks, things like that, which I think that's enough for a lot of the athletes today. Not that they need to be working on doing all the, between the legs and all that stuff. I think they need to work on the fundamentals of the game, the footwork of the game, the ball handling in tight positions, making free throws, making layups, just all those small, I think up until really sophomores, juniors in high school, everybody needs to be doing the same thing. That's kind of my train of thought, my school of belief. And so for the athletes who are struggling with those roles, those identities, I would tell you, rather than trying to optimize for where you're going to go, optimize for where you are right now today. And then we can take some of the extra leftover time and build those other skills. So for me, I worked on all my post moves during my high school. I didn't shoot any threes. I tell that story all the time. I didn't shoot any threes in high school. Not in the game, not in practice, not in the workout. I didn't shoot them. My coach told me, Obi, you don't need to worry about that. You need to be able to make a 15-foot jump shot. Be able to score around the basket first. And so the first 2-3 years of my basketball career was only spent scoring right around the basket, right in front of the rim. Right around the basket, 15 foot and in. That's all we did. Worked on ball handling, stationary on the move, worked on different kinds of layups around the rim, different finishes, push finishes around the rim, quick finishes, slow steps, all those things. That's what we worked on. That's what I worked on up until I was a senior in high school. But I go and train with these kids now, and they're working on the Steph Curry finishes, the underhanded lobs, the Dame step backs and side steps. While all of that is great, you watch those NBA guys, they do those moves because they're in those situations. As a high schooler, you won't be in that situation. You don't need to work on it. You won't get that shot. You don't need to work on it. You're wasting your time. And so that's what I tell for my athletes is don't worry about the flashy moves. Be able to make a shot. That is the role that's going to translate. Dribbling the ball 50, 100 times, though, that doesn't translate. And I say 50, 100, it's more like 5 or 6. If you're taking 5 dribbles, you're taking too many. But I'll see so many kids out here pounding the ball, dribbling the ball, and then they wonder why they can't fit into a system because no system requires one man to dribble the ball that many times. There's not a system that requires it. So by you working on that, you're already putting yourself out of the system. Well, what should we work on, Obi? Well, work on the role that you have, which probably consists of making free throws, making layups, and making open threes. Open three, free throw, layup. If you can do that, you will be able to fit into almost any system, anywhere. The guys that struggle are the ones who are dribbling the ball so many times that you can't figure out, is he going to pass the ball? Is he going to keep the ball? Like teams, coaches, they're not looking for those guys. And so if you're struggling with the role, if you're struggling with your role, I can tell you, and I talk to parents all the time, I can tell you that you need to be focusing on, 1, making an open shot. Not dribbling the ball to shoot the ball, just catching the ball and shooting it. The simplest shot in the game. That one, free throws and layups. And then the rest, you'll be able to find your roles.
What's the main misunderstanding that you think players have about roles in general?
The misunderstanding that I think the misunderstanding of roles lies in the dichotomy between what I want to do and what is being asked of me. And I think that's the problem is we want to show everybody what we can do, what I've been working on. Everybody, look at my between the legs. Everybody, watch me shoot this step back that I've shot 150 times in practice. I want to show you that I can do it. Watch me do it. And while that's all great, that shot is not required for you in the game, so it's pointless. It's not required. You won't have the opportunity to shoot that shot. And so you're working on something that you'll never do, but you want to satisfy yourself, and so you want to work on it and show everybody that you can do it. I'll give you another example. The biggest problem we have, I think maybe not so much nowadays, a little bit less than previous years. Back in the day when there was more of a traditional 5-man or traditional 4, bigger posts, it was the thing that post guys always want to dribble the ball. They always want to dribble the ball and they always want to shoot threes. Why? Because they're the biggest guys on the court and they don't ever get to do that. And they think that they can do that. And not that they can't, maybe they can. Maybe they got a good 3-point shot. I played with a lot of big men who can really shoot the 3. And so they want to show everybody that they can shoot the 3. But the coach doesn't want you to shoot the 3. And that's the problem, is I can shoot the 3. Well, coach says no. Well, coach, I can do it. Well, I don't want you to. But coach, I work on that, but I don't want you to. But coach, at the next level, but I don't want you to on this team. And that's like that. Guys can't understand that. They can't understand that although you may be able to do this, it is not being asked of you by the person, the coach, who runs the team, who manages the team. And so the coach has all these chips and he hands them out to each player, right? You're a player, you get the chip that the coach hands to you. Well, what guys will do is they'll get this chip and they say, nah, coach, I don't like this one. I don't want this one. I want the one that he has. He's got the shooting chip. I want the shooting chip. No, you have the dribbling chip. I don't want the dribbling chip. I want the pick and roll chip. You don't get that chip though. You only get the chip that you were handed. And you need to take that chip and do the best job that you can with that one chip or 2 chips or however many chips you get. You don't go asking and begging for chips. You can earn another chip, but the only way you get that chip is if he gives you that chip. And it's so hard for people to understand that. And I get it. Sometimes, like, I get it. You'll get a coach who's not a very good coach. It happens. Happens at every level. He's just not a very good coach. He doesn't understand the game. He doesn't know the game. Maybe he was put in a position that he didn't even ask to be in. Maybe he asked to be in a position and he doesn't really deserve it. Whatever the case may be, there's a million different scenarios. You don't believe in the coach and what he's saying, and so you try to override him, but you don't have the authority to override him. And so your job is to just do the best with what you have. And guys will just, they cannot accept that role. And it's unfortunate because a lot of careers, a lot of really good players are lost because they cannot accept what they were given. And part of it is like, yeah, I understand that, you're bigger, they're trying to box you in. They're trying to, limit your capabilities, your talent. All of that is true, yes. And you may not like it, yes. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. And I think that my success in large part has come to my ability to say, okay, I'll do what you're asking me to do. And that's it. My high school coach, I went and saw him the other day and he was talking to the kids about this, about how Obi came in and Obi took less of a role to then help the team win. And at the time, it sounds real like heroic right now, but at the time I didn't really care. I was just doing whatever the coach was asking me to do, and it ended up working out. And now looking back, hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's kind of where it started, was like just being able to say, all right, I'll do less if that means winning. And everybody is asked to be in that position, and very few people accept that role. So that would be my main concern. And also to kind of piggyback off of that, my success overseas in basketball came because I was able to wait for my opportunity. And aggressively waiting, don't get me wrong, but I was able to wait for that opportunity. And I understood that you have to grow your tenure. And I think now with the instant gratification and the way that we want everything to come and arrive like Amazon, we want it to be same day delivery. It just doesn't work like that. And so you may be working your butt off for 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 20 months. Like you might be working and each day you have to wake up and fall into your role and learn to love your role. But by being able to do that, you then show credibility. You show to your coaches and to your teammates that, hey, this guy's here to do the best that he can. He's not here to ask, and he's going to keep his mouth shut and do what's asked of him. And that's the player that grows. Not the player who goes and throws a fit about the chips that he was given. It's the player who takes the chips and says, all right, I'll do the best that I can.
So you kind of touched on this before, but I'm curious, how does communication with coaches go overseas? Because I know like sometimes the language barrier there is a language barrier, but also like is the level of respect the same? Are you more conversational with them? Is it very military? Like how does that work usually, or does it depend?
I've had many coaches, man, and they've all been kind of different. I've had coaches overseas that didn't speak English. Period. They just didn't speak English. And so like that, imagine what that's like. Man.
What is that like? Because how do you
coach that doesn't speak English is tough. Because it's not tough talking to the coach. I can sit here and talk to the coach. We can figure it out, right? You and I, we can use our. He has enough. He knows enough English that we can sit here and go back and forth and figure it out. Fine. But add the game inside of it. Now it's a whole, like, he's yelling at you, and now he really doesn't speak English. And so he's just yelling the first thing that comes out of his mouth. And, like, you're hearing it, and you're like, wait, that doesn't even make sense, coach. It doesn't, and, like, when we're talking candidly, he cannot make sense, and we can have a conversation. When we're in the heat of a game, and I've got to defend, like, no, coach, like, this is, when we've got to, like, kind of communicate, because communication is not always calm and collected. Sometimes in the heat of a game, he might be yelling, I might be yelling, maybe to just hear each other over the crowd, or maybe because the emotions are heightened, who knows? But we might be yelling, and now it's like we really can't understand him. So now I'm looking at him, I'm yelling at him, he's yelling at me, I'm looking at the assistant speaking in English, he's speaking in Spanish. I'm like, yo, I don't know what's going on. I can't really understand what's going on right now. And my guy's going over here to score the ball. And so you're like having to try to figure, you got so many moving pieces. And I think that the part of that is just adapting and figuring it out, because that'll really drive you crazy, because you're at a disadvantage. Let's just call it what it is. You're at a disadvantage, but nobody cares. Nobody cares that you're at a disadvantage. So they're like, figure it out right now or go home. And that's what it is. And so you have to try and that's where the professionalism comes in at. It's like, you have to be professional. I know that I'm 100% right about what just happened. Coach thinks that I'm 100% wrong. I've got to concede. He's the coach. And like, it's hard for guys with their ego, and that's why your ego's got to take a hit. My dad used to tell me all the time, is like, even though that you're right, sometimes you got to say you're wrong. And that's one of those scenarios, is going back and forth with the coach. Anytime you're going back and forth with the coach, you're wrong. Period. You're wrong. If you're going back and forth with the coach, you're wrong. You shouldn't be going back and forth with the coach, because whatever he says is law, right? And so if you've got something you want to bring it up on the side. You have to bring it up in a manner that's like going to be accepted. And so I think the communication part of it is not so much how difficult it is, but it comes with kind of taming your ego and having to do things that are outside of your norm and find solutions that are outside of your norm. I think that's where the difficulty comes in at.
Do you have any tips for someone who is going overseas for the first time and might have a coach that doesn't really speak English? Did anything help you? Do you learn the language a little bit? Like,
the coach is your gateway in. I just never understood guys arguing with the coaches. I'd never understood arguing with the coach. I never understood arguing with the ref. I don't understand those things. And so if you're a player, you're an emotional player, or you're not an emotional player, I don't care. Don't argue with the coach. Don't argue with the coach. And like, nowadays I see kids do that with me, and I just won't even stand for it. And I won't stand for it, because that's what I learned at the highest level, is like, you don't argue with the coach. I don't care if you're right. I don't care what you think. Don't argue with the coach. It never ends up well, because at the end of the day, he's the one who opens the door and puts you in the game. And so if you're not on his good side, you won't play. You won't score. And I want to score. Like, selfishly, I want to play for me. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure I'm in the game. And that's how I think of the game. And it's not about like, am I right or am I wrong? It's about what's going to help me play the game. I'll be wrong, sure, if that means I get more minutes. Sure. And I think that guys are so stuck on, I'm right, you're wrong, that I'm going to battle with him, even though it's not in my best interest. And so if you're a player, you're going overseas, not even overseas, because I did this in the Olympics. If you're a player and you're struggling, and if you're struggling with the offense, if you're struggling with the defense, if you're struggling with communication with the team, teammates, coaches, whatever you're struggling with, it's like in business. They say, ask your customer. Whatever you're struggling with, go ask your coach. go ask your coach. Don't ask a player, because in basketball sense, it might make sense what you're talking about. But in the scheme of the team that you play on, the only rules are the ones that he sets. And so you need to abide by his rules. Like in basketball, the term is, you don't help out a strong side corner. You don't help out a strong side corner. Well, if your coach tells you to help out a strong side corner, what should you do? Well, I'm going to help out a strong side corner. And that simple analogy right there is what kills people. Is they're like, wait, no, that's not how it works. No. And it's like, well, maybe in America that's not how it works, but we're not there. We're not in America. And I think that's what guys don't understand is like wherever you were taught, yeah, it doesn't work there. But here, where I make the rules, it works because I said so. So do that. I'm real like strict on that, man, because that is one of the main things that I have seen kill people's career. Just kill their career. Kill it because they will not adhere to the plan set by the person who holds the keys. They won't adhere to the plan. So talk to your coach. Figure out what he wants you to do and do that.
Man, and how do you get like, because what you just said, I've seen that in like regular life also, not just basketball. Like, how do you get through to someone who maybe doesn't see what you're seeing and isn't listening to the coach and maybe is letting their ego get the best of them? Is there any way to reach that person? Because there's a lot of talent sometimes that gets kind of like left behind because they're just not listening.
I would encourage them to ask themselves. I would encourage them to question their own intelligence. Because that's what I do. I question my intelligence. I put it as simply as I can. I would ask them, I'd say, well, you know that this is the person who puts you inside the game. There's only one person. You can't go sub yourself in. There's only one person who does that, and that's the coach. And the only way that you're going to stay in that game is if you're on his good list. If you're on his good list, that's the only way. And every time he's got a list of things that he wants you to do, and every time you don't do those things, it's going to be a mark for the other side. And so, like, it's strategic. This is it is, what's the word I'm looking for? Persuasive, right? It's communication. Like, you've got to, anytime you're trying to get your way, it's all persuasive. You've got to convince the other person. And for a player to want to get in the game, you're going to have to convince this guy to put you in the game. And it sounds kind of funny because there's not really, like, there is convincing him, but it's a long way of just saying that you've got to do what he values. It's his team. You got to do what he values, not what you value. And a lot of people can't get out of their own way. And so they're when we talk about being stuck in their way, I mean, that's what I help people do, is just figure out where you're trying to go and what we need to do to get there. And team sports, for me, I think there's a very clear way of where we want to go. And I'm trying to figure out how else to say it, but there's not really any other way, man, about that. And I'm very like strong-minded about that because it's the number one killer of team sports, honestly. All right, guys, that's it for this latest community episode. Just real quick before we get out of here, we've been having a lot of people that have been kind of tapping in with us, whether that's on Instagram, on YouTube, on X, on any platform. So if you guys have any questions for us, you can drop them on any of those platforms. We'll pull them. We like to answer them here live. We're also going live on IG. We're trying to do it every Monday. So if you guys are enjoying those, leave us some feedback. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, and if there's any questions that we can answer for you, and we'll get those answered. See you guys soon. Peace.